Welcome to the second video in the Wheels three-part Charity Trustee Driver's Licence. In the first part of this course, we looked at the definition of a trustee and the trustee's role in your organisation. In this part of the course, we're going to have a look at the specific legal duties of a charity trustee. To complete this second part of the course, watch this short video, consult the further reading below, and take a short quiz to test your understanding of this vital area. Let's begin. Where do the legal duties of charity trustees come from? The volunteers who run or govern a charity have always had legal duties. These duties are drawn from a number of sources. These include what is written in the organisation's governing document, also known as the charity's constitution, from specific legislation such as company law, employment law, health and safety legislation, and also the duties that come from decisions made by our courts down through the years. Additionally, however, under the 2009 Charities Act, the charity trustee was given certain new legal duties that they must follow. This has clarified the role of the volunteer charity trustee to a greater extent than before. The 2009 Act was actually only commenced in 2014. One of the main changes that it brought about for Irish charities was the establishment of a new independent statutory agency, the Charities Regulator. In addition to setting up a publicly accessible register of charities, one of the key functions of the regulator is to facilitate better administration and management of Ireland's charities. One of the ways they do this is by providing charities with guidelines in good practice. As part of this function, the Charities Regulator has produced a guidance document for charity trustees, which outlines their legal duties. The information in this video is based on that document, and you can find the full guide to download below this video. These guidelines will be reviewed from time to time, so to get the most up-to-date version, visit charitiesregulator.ie. What are the legal duties of a charity trustee? There are 12 legal duties of a charity trustee. We'll deal with them one by one. Legal duty number 1. As a charity trustee, you must comply with your charity's governing document. All charities must have a governing document. The governing document of your charity you may know as your memos and articles, your rules, or your constitution. It's essential for you as a trustee to be familiar with your charity's governing document. The governing document sets out the powers and duties of a trustee and the purpose of your charity. It is essentially a rule book for the organisation. You, as a trustee, have a duty to ensure that the organisation works within the limits set out in that document. Legal duty number 2. Ensure that your charity is carrying out its charitable purposes for the public benefit. The charitable purpose of your organisation is the legal term that refers to the work carried out by the charity, its aim or its purpose, if you will. Irish law defines certain purposes or activities as charitable and certain purposes or activities as not being charitable. The definition of a charitable purpose in Irish law is wide. In the 2009 Charities Act, some of the purposes mentioned include the advancement of education, the relief of poverty, and the promotion of health. There are many other purposes mentioned in the Act, and you can find the full list in the document below, What is a Charitable Purpose? Certain specified activities, such as the promotion of sport, trades unions, or political parties, are not considered charitable in Irish law. By law, trustees must ensure that at all times the work of their charity is consistent with the charitable purposes in their constitution. The trustees have a duty to ensure that the work of the charity doesn't act outside of the limits of those charitable purposes. Secondly, the trustees must ensure that all the work that the charity does benefits the public. This means that no one can make personal gain or profit from the work of the charity, particularly the members or the charity trustees. This doesn't mean you can't pay your staff, because if employees do work, they should be compensated for it, of course. But what it does mean is that all your organisation's activities must be beneficial in an identifiable way to the general public or a section of the public. Legal duty number 3. Ensure that your charity is registered on the Charities Regulator's Register of Charities. The Charities Regulator maintains a web-based register of all the charities operating in Ireland. It's the trustee's duty to ensure that your charity is registered with the regulator and that all the information that the regulator has on your organisation is up to date. In order to make certain changes to the charity, such as changing its name or its constitution, the trustees must seek the permission of the regulator. The trustees' details should also be kept up to date with the regulator. The primary means by which the charity's information is kept up to date on the Register of Charities is through the annual return. Legal duty number 4. Ensure that your charity keeps proper books of account. Similar to company law, trustees are obliged to ensure that their charity keeps proper books of account. The books of account must have entries from day to day of all money received and paid out by your charity, along with a record of assets and liabilities. These records should be kept for at least 6 years from the end of the financial year to which they refer. The trustees must take an active role in overseeing the finances of the organisation. As with all the legal duties outlined here, you can't delegate the responsibility to anyone else. However, the actual work of doing the books of account can be delegated to a staff person or a contractor. All trustees, individually and collectively, are responsible for ensuring that the finances are being well managed and accounted for. It's not something that you can delegate to 1 or 2 trustees who happen to have accounting experience or a financial background. If you, as a trustee, feel you don't have the necessary expertise to carry out this duty, then training should be provided. The Charities Regulator has produced a document called Internal Financial Controls Guidelines for Charities. It sets out the basic financial controls that you should have in place in your charity. Legal duty number 5. Ensure that your charity prepares and furnishes an annual report to the Charities Regulator. The trustees must ensure that their charity submits annual reports to the regulator. The format is determined by the regulator. Trustees should understand what is required and ensure that the correct information is returned to the regulator before the deadline. You should familiarise yourself with the most up-to-date guidance on this at the Charity Regulator's website. Having produced all this information, you should post it on your website. It helps you to communicate your impact and account to the public. Legal duty number 6. Ensure that your charity prepares and furnishes financial accounts to the Charities Regulator. Each year, your charity must return statements of account to the regulator. The actual format of these accounts and the means by which they are returned is set out by the regulator. It's your responsibility as a trustee to review the relevant legislation and regulation regularly to ensure that your charity is meeting the accounting requirements that have been set out for you. Legal duty number 7. Act in the best interests of your charity. Different charities run their boards in different ways. Some meet monthly, some quarterly, some meet in the evenings and some during office hours. Some boards have subcommittees, some do not. However often they happen, trustee meetings usually involve some element of updating and reporting, along with an element of discussion and thinking about what should happen next. Sometimes decisions are made and sometimes not. It's important that regardless of how a trustee got appointed to a board or how connected they may be to other interested parties, when it comes to making decisions about the charity's work and future, each trustee must always act exclusively for the good of the charity. It's really important to stress that in discussion, different trustees bring different views to the table. But when it comes to the decision-making point, each trustee must put the charity's interests first rather than an outside party. Sometimes a trustee will find themselves in a conflict of loyalty situation. This arises when your own personal interests clash with those of the charity. As a trustee, you should declare this as a potential conflict of loyalty, and then, with the agreement of the other trustees, either absent yourself from the decision-making on this issue or ensure that your decision is wholly in the interests of the charity. Where it's sufficiently serious and involves a financial gain for you as the trustee or a close family member, then a conflict of loyalty can become a conflict of interest. As a trustee, you should declare this potential conflict of interest and absent yourself from the decision-making process on the issue. Legal duty number 8. Act with reasonable care and skill. As we've said, you don't need a specialist qualification to become a charity trustee. However, you do need to use your experience, skills, common sense and time to ensure that you perform your role well. It's part of your duty to manage yourself and your time as a charity trustee. You can delegate day-to-day running of the organisation to others, but you can never delegate overall responsibility for how those activities are carried out. If you need to get specialist help in order to govern your organisation, you should work with the appropriate professionals to get the advice you need. Time is often the most important contribution you can make as a charity trustee. This means always turning up to meetings and always reading all of the documentation in full in advance of the meeting. It means shouldering decision making and avoiding dominating or not contributing to meetings. Charity trustees must ensure that their organisation complies with all relevant legislation, including data protection law, health and safety regulations, employment law, equality legislation, and so on. Legal duty number 9, manage the assets of your charity. Assets include all property that has value, including physical things like buildings, equipment, cash, and more intangibles like investments and financial contracts. Trustees must ensure that all assets are accounted for and only used for the charitable purposes of the organisation. They must ensure that assets are not wasted, misappropriated, or misused. Legal duty number 10, make appropriate investment decisions. It's the trustee's role to collectively ensure that the organisation is properly resourced to carry out its activities now and in the future. You may need to make decisions about the investment of the charity's money. As a trustee, you must make these decisions with due care and skill and in the best interests of the charity. Legal duty number 11. Ensure that the charity's regulator is informed if you are of the opinion that there are reasonable grounds to believe that a theft or fraud has occurred. If you have reasonable grounds to believe that a theft or fraud has been or is being committed, then you must disclose this to the charity's regulator in writing as soon as possible. Of course, you should also refer information about a theft or a fraud in your charity to the Gardaí. Legal duty number 12. Ensure that you comply with directions issued by the regulator. Both current and former trustees have a duty to comply with any directions issued by the regulator. This includes any requests for documentation or information by the regulator or its investigators. The charity's regulator may require you to provide documentation relating to your bank account if they have reasonable grounds for believing that money passed through the account as a result of misconduct by you in relation to your duties. Those are your 12 legal duties as a charity trustee. Do take a look at the booklet, Guidance for Charity Trustees, published by the charity's regulator, which you can download below the video. And do make sure that you and your fellow trustees are familiar with these key aspects of your role.